Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Ben Shipper, and I'm a writer, artist, and designer. And I love print media, printed books specifically. And we're going to look at Ralph McQuarrie today. We're going to look at this book, which is Ralph and Kevin J. Anderson, an interesting combo. And perhaps we'll get to this one, which is this huge double-size Abrams monograph for Ralph, which is incredible. But this was the first basically art book I ever got, and my dad gave it to me. So I'm really excited to dive in. I will be winging it. I'm shooting this like on the day I'm going to post it, and typically I shoot a couple days before and try to make it, moderately prepared. I have not done that today, but I think there's something to be said about just getting stuff done. I am definitely a perfectionist, and so one of the ways this year I'm trying to work out some of those kinks is just doing something, showing up with who I am, what I have at the moment, and letting the chips fall where they may. So I appreciate you guys watching it. And sharing if you do like this kind of content. Cartoonist Kayfabe is a great channel that I personally love, and so this is a copycat kind of channel. And if you want to see, if you want to get up to speed with American comics specifically, check out them, and you're going to learn a lot. But today we're going to talk about Ralph McQuarrie, the visionary artist behind George Lucas's masterpiece, Star Wars. But first, I am working on, very nearly done with Joe Death and the Graven Image. It's going to be published this year from Dark Horse Comics. Can't wait to share a pre-order link when this is finally done. If you want to check out my newsletter, I'll be in the process over the next couple of weeks of talking about drawing crowd scenes, and we're gonna dive into my sketchbook, and I'm gonna wax poetic about how to set yourself up well for a crowd scene. And if you go to my website, benjaminshipper.com, you can find my newsletter, Old Noggin, there, and you can subscribe to a weekly newsletter where I'll share what I'm working on and the stuff I'm enjoying from other creators. And I do like to look at creators specifically. So for instance, I think there's quite a lot happening today in fan culture and with franchises. So franchises, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the big ones on every level. There's a lot of franchises now. We sort of live in a day where that's what is our popular stories and culture is coming from, typically companies. So they began with singular creators. They began with George Lucas. They began with Tolkien. They began with J.K. Rowling and C.S. Lewis, and a plethora, Ursula K. Le Guin, which there's no Earthsea movie yet. I don't know why, but, well, I guess there is. There was that Miyazaki one. Anyway, they begin with singular creators, and even in Star Wars, where it's coming from George Lucas, Ralph McQuarrie is really the singular visionary that launched stuff. His art was very influential when Lucas was going to, I believe, investors, studios, showing people, showing people what it is he wanted to pull off in his movie. And these were impressive. I mean, they're impressive now. Ralph McQuarrie's paintings are impressive today, but they were impressive then. And I believe that they were very influential in getting people excited, I think, on every level, I imagine, in the just the fabrication of like small models, and the world on a visual effects level. This was the foundation. So there's tons of people involved with Star Wars back in the day, even in the first trilogy. But I believe there was less people involved then than there is now. So Star Wars is a company product now. And while there might be singular people that we know about and that we like doing stuff in the Star Wars universe now, it is a company product. And that can result in great things. And I'm still waiting for that great thing to be made from a Disney company product. But we're not going to go into that. I do want to, but that conversation is a very interesting one, and it affects people on an individual level. So typically, if you're watching this, you're probably an individual. You might be in a company, but there's something to be said about what an individual can do, and that individual's place in the larger fabric of entertainment and visual culture. So Ralph is the guy that we're going to talk about. This book is odd because let's see when it was published. So this is the Illustrated Star Wars Universe, art by Ralph McQuarrie, text by Kevin J. Anderson. So this really isn't an art book. It is and it isn't. This was published in, let's see, I'll flip through these real quick to find the publication date, 95. So this was well before art of books were really exciting or really made and given to the public in a pedestrian way. You know, we have tons of art of books. Every time there's a movie made or a video game, there's art of books. But this existed in a world before that. And so I don't think the publishers at, I think Del Rey were, you know, it wasn't a thought, I believe, to them that they were like, well, let's get Ralph to talk about his work, and let's get other people to talk about how influential Ralph's work was. And let's get those thoughts about how the work and the art was created and how it affected the Star Wars that we see on film. This is a fictional. This is fictional world building in a weird form. So it profiles the planets that we see in Star Wars, and it's Kevin J. Anderson who is writing, in the Star Wars universe, expanded universe. It's him setting up a character he's going to write through these characters. So, for instance, this character, Hule, senior anthropologist, he's setting up this is, for lack of a better term, or the best term, kayfabe. It's the author writing through a character that Ralph McQuarrie designed. And so there's this fictional connection between what Kevin J. Anderson is doing and Ralph McQuarrie. So the art came first, and Kevin J. Anderson is sort of writing a story about Tatooine. It's not really a story. It's like just an account. So he's setting up world building information here. He's acting as if he's an anthropologist and he's on the ground level at Tatooine, and it's fascinating. It was odd at the time that I was reading it because I wanted to know more about the art, or I think that's what I wanted, but I was given this, and it was interesting. I think it was actually probably better because it, instead of showing the man behind the curtain, it didn't do that. It showed more curtain, I suppose. It showed more of a story. So this is a piece of Star Wars, expanded universe lore. And it just so happens to be, made after the fact of Ralph McQuarrie's art. So let's talk about the art. And I don't know if I can do everything, but just Ralph seems, his work is like, I would say, just visionary on every level. He did come from a military illustration background, and so he's very good at hard surface stuff. But he's great at scale, and sometimes character work. Sometimes his characters are, lacking, or at least they're just there to set the scene and show the scale. But he does a lot of character design or creature design as well. And, early concepts that didn't get made into the film for Coruscant, Bespin, Cloud City. These, come into play in episode 2 on, what's that water planet? I'm forgetting now. But I did know at one point. But stuff like that is reused, different color for the cloud cars in the movies, but just so good at like scale and we don't need to see a character's face here. It's about the design, but it's so much more than that. It's getting the atmosphere that you would need to see this as a live action. So it's like he's a great designer, but he's also a great cinematographer, I would say, thinking about how things can be posed in an exciting way. So we're going to get a lot of paintings and a lot of sketches as well. So Tatooine, really nice setup. Great to see just like anthropomorphic big owls here, devil tails. This is early stuff, and so there's so much through and through it. But he's setting up stuff so well. It's like he's designed this to work well, where it's busy, but he's located the action in the most contrasted area in this one. Just a straight up frame, not unabashedly framing stuff. So he's setting stuff up to be successful, and like a chair getting kicked over is a great character piece. Like something, it's showing there's a lot of movement, and there's fear and danger in the air, and the main characters are off to the side. This might be Luke at that time. A little quiet scenes like this are great. Like it's just no one is specifically the target here, but it's so good, the lighting and just the brownness of it. There's nuance here in the image, and it's played with matched with really poppy colors at times. I think this was probably a matte painting in the film. And this stuff is like, he just went crazy. I don't know what notes like George was giving out at the time to like have all this. Maybe this was a sort of a nicer, refined Jabba's palace. It looks sort of like an airport. But as I was reading this as a kid, it was just like, there's just stories happening everywhere. Like this is just odd, right? Like there would be a wrestling match here, but these are sort of Gamorrean guards, and it's like, they're not guards. I think this is so interesting because I think typically in the Star Wars universe, people associate, the species or the person type culture with the role that they find them in the film. So Gamorreans are always guards, but here, Ralph has them in a different context and in a completely different light. He might be a guard on his day job, but perhaps this is, some culture. This is some, family outing or something or whatever. But there's quite a lot of humanity to his work, and the vision that he's putting people in. Just trading and bartering. Conversations. This is a huge thing in successful world building, to have characters, just like people. I suppose maybe less so today, but people talk to each other, or they used to, before we had cell phones. And when you're waiting for something, when you're here for something, you're typically involved with other people at every level. And I think that that's what Ralph shows a lot of times when he's just staging something that hasn't characters. Characters are usually talking to each other or doing something that you're like, yeah, people kind of interact like that. And the odd one here would be Luke in his black cloak, where everyone else is around each other, talking to each other. Just so cool what he can do with like curves, like this curve that goes into the entryway. I'm always stuck whenever I get to doors, and I'm just like, how do you make doors interesting? Make the passageways interesting, and it's a big deal when you can do that. Like it's so fantastic when you can do that successfully. And even he's suggesting that there's a second version of this. So we see this in total, but here we get a little bit of the outline and two more of the bottom of these lanterns. And so it's like he's entering into a few of these sort of gateways. I would never think to do that kind of stacking. And just using that motif, the lantern motifs. And again, this is the domestic life. It's a little bit more civilized. It's more than what was on the film. To be honest, this captivated me. The films are narrow visions, narrow narrative story arcs, but the expanded universe at the time was really rich in this type of domesticity or lives that exist outside of the films. So it was a huge thing for me, and there was tons of content at the time that was really lively. I've lost track of it now because it sort of is it is a company product, I think, at every level. But these are sort of Boromore monks, I believe, and they're the ones that sort of get their brains put in little robots, which it's like a religious culture. It's like they're anti-materialists, I believe, and they're sort of when they graduate out of when they transcend sort of their bodies, they're ready to be put in this metal thing, which was the creepiest thing as a kid. But that's fantastic because it sticks with you. It's this weird concept, executed both in a written language as story and visual as well. And it's not even that he just drew this. He probably did draw this as a sketch straight on, but he's putting this sandcrawler on sort of off kilter. It's on a hill, so there's this perspective and great storytelling on both sides. Just awesome. And a lot of times he'll get a little interior of the ships or the sandcrawler, and he'll get that like inner glow of light coming from things and out of windows, with very little detail. It's like a couple blobs of paint, but there's variety in those strokes, and it's like two colors of yellow, but in context, it just makes you believe that there's something. There's more to see if I went in there, which I did love the second episode of Mandalorian. I thought that was the best, where there's all that sandcrawler stuff and the Jawas. He just went so far. I don't know if this was ever in the story or he just went so far, but the cultures here for like Jawas and the place where they scrap stuff, they bring their scrap and, melt it down. It's just awesome. And little wisps of like another camp over there. So it's like we've got this camp, but then he's got a little bit of a wisp of smoke, probably from another one of these camps off in the distance. So it's implication. And implication is like everything in like this type of visionary design. You're implying a lot of stuff. Or Ralph is. And there's some, and Kevin J. Anderson really is good. Like he's got a lot of great stuff to work with. I think, that'd be interesting to talk to him at some point, or hear from him at some point about this book, because Ralph is just giving him so much runway with like Jawas and their town, and these are sort of the militia guard that's protecting against the sandcrawlers. And we've got electricity, street lights. It's an interesting culture, and I think it just doesn't it exists only on the sandcrawler, basically, in the Star Wars movies and shows. There's so much room to pull stories from. So this was the Krayt Dragon, and in the Mandalorian, it's like a sandworm, because they I don't know if they wanted to compete with Dune or wanted to keep grabbing from it, but I thought it was a little lazy. Not showing the creature, just having him be under the sand at all times. And people that grew up with Star Wars know about this image, everywhere. I mean, this is the Krayt Dragon, and it's a classic dragon. And I like a little bit of what they did in Mandalorian about sort of a knight coming to slay a dragon, kind of save a town from this. It's a little medieval, but I wish they would have leaned into this actual dragon a little bit more, or a lot more. Tusken Raiders, it's like, Kevin J. Anderson sets this up as like an oral culture. So there's these campfires, and there's this oral culture emanating from these people, and they're nomadic, and it's just so wonderful what nighttime and what fire does, and the type of setup here. It's here, but then this is important too. This backdrop of banthas in the back with the moonlight on them. They're not getting the firelight; they're getting moonlight only. And again, it's implication. It's like this is important, but this also is important, and it would be less if these minor details in the back were missing. And it's so much more successful because if you have those small details that are kind of characters, you don't need to do a whole lot of rock work. Like these big shapes are just big black shapes. All right, Coruscant. Imperial Center. Very, I don't know how different. I would say it is from the prequel trilogy. I in my opinion, it's pretty different. Here's the guy that's sort of going to walk us through it. Chief of the Emperor's propaganda dissemination section. So this guy is setting out, Kevin J. Anderson gets to write from the Imperial side of things in this one, in this passage, because he set his character up as a propagandist from the Empire, which is a really interesting take. So he's going to be rah-rah Empire, which I think is appropriate if you're going to showcase maybe the best of what Coruscant is, which is this giant planet that's a city. This stuff doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, I see it and it's like, well, yeah, it's definitely a city. But when you get in close, you realize how crazy these brushstrokes are. and how implied it is. Very impressionistic. This might be a close-up of one of his stuff, but it's super impressionistic, which, you know, just works. I've seen it work, you know, obviously successfully in let's say foliage or you know, the natural world, but to see it work in a city context is really interesting. And same here, a lot of like really, really brushy stroke stuff. I mean, he's not even, you know, there's hardly any lines here. And the composition and the light sources are just selling it really well. Like, it's so good. The atmospheric perspective here, where, you know, when you've got stuff in the foreground, you see a lot more of the shadow and contrast. But as you go back, there's atmosphere that starts to cloud over buildings and mountains. And all these lanes of, and the color palette. The color palette is pretty nuanced. I would say this is very similar to like a lot of well, what Dune's color palette is. You know, muted, a little bit more refined, and the prequel trilogy was really pretty poppy. A lot of like really bright stuff. This is more muted. I think McQuarrie, you know, he went more sophisticated and gray, and leaned into that like concrete kind of look, I think. But I love his sketches. I mean, it's amazing how little he's doing here, but how successful it is in his mark making, because of the composition, I believe. This is more of the prequel trilogy stuff. I think these were even in there, brought into the film world. Big like pipelines. Like, it is interesting to see some vacant spots on Coruscant. That was interesting, just thinking about how, you know, yeah, how fuel is transported, or how water is, or even electrical cables. You've got to have some, you know, space. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's fantasy, but again, this is visionary, and it was something that he, I don't know, put in there, and I think it does create an interesting contrast to just a big city. Real muted. His clouds are interesting. There are a lot of he does a lot of vertical clouds that are just going straight up. I don't know exactly why he chose to do that, or how he chose it, but it's really fantastic. Like, there's a lot of horizontal stuff happening in these images, but those vertical clouds really set stuff up for interesting contrast. This was a crazy one because there's almost no straight lines, but there's tons of ellipses, tons of round, you know, structures, and that side of the planet, like, always throws you off like center. Makes you feel like you're in space. I thought these were cool. I always get this idea that this is what's going to happen when all the satellites are surrounding Earth, and people don't want to be on Earth anymore, maybe, and there's just like these giant, you know, kind of pedestals up here in which, you know, people can, you know, have these elaborate parties or gatherings to, you know, the overlords of the world at a certain point can have a little cocktail party spinning above the Earth. Pyramids are an interesting introduction. Like, obviously from Egypt and the ancient world, but brought into this space. It's really fantastic, and that I think that was probably the portion that I would have liked to see in the movies. A little bit more tied to some of our ancient culture. Dagobah, and we are getting it from a member of a Command of Forgotten Republic research team. So Dagobah is very hidden in the movies, but apparently there's a research team that did a little sketching out there and transmitted stuff probably before they were killed. But this is, it's such a contrast because it's all natural stuff. He's going, we just saw a city world, and now we're going to see, this was in The Mandalorian, which I liked as well. I don't know if I love the application of it, but yeah, it was cool to see it. That I think it was an ice spider there, but really organic forms, and just lovely like interaction between monsters here, like really, really fun. And a sensitivity to character design, in the sense that this is like a giant slug type character, and this is kind of more of a classic dragon character. And it's almost like a hippopotamus, where a hippopotamus is, one of the most dangerous creatures on Earth to people. They're very aggressive, very territorial, but they're very, large and kind of cute in a lot of ways. But they'll do damage to, like, they can hold their own against like tigers and stuff. So just because you're sort of a snaky character with bigger teeth, doesn't mean you're going to win out in this fight. And we got classic dragons on Dagobah, I guess. We see above the canopy, which I thought was interesting. A lot of pen work here. He'll do pen work and color it with markers, I think. Really cool. Hoth was probably my favorite of this book. There's all this like white and all this like drawing of like interior ice sculpting, and really cool. I really love the costume designs in Hoth. They just seemed, his posing here of people is realistic. It's very sinuous, or there's sort of an S curve to people. Really like just true. And the helmets and stuff they're wearing, the like bunkers, it feels like a kind of like a camp, almost like a really expeditionary kind of camp, I thought. And we get to see what the tauntauns eat. There's these sort of grottos that have some vegetation. We see the AT-ATs. I don't know what exactly the scheme is for this one, what kind of story Kevin J. Anderson is weaving together on this one. Probably just a rebel engineer that's documenting this stuff. This is a fun tauntaun sketch. It's more lizard than what we got. I think we got a little bit more llama in the film, but these lizard versions are pretty interesting. There's something about like being underground but seeing a little over the ground. There's this just kind of like we're in the trench in a lot of these scenes. We're behind rocks, we're seeing outside, we're seeing just multiple planes, and so we get that sort of big sky feeling on Hoth. but the terrain is rocky and kind of unstable, but kind of covered in snow. And even this like sensitivity to like get this idea of ice being shaved, it was just so well done, that he could almost like sculpt a cave and then picture how that would be demoed to form an outpost. So Asteroid Belt is included in this one. I got the big space worm, which I probably, it is probably taken from Dune. This is one of those things that even in the original trilogy, they were looking at Dune a lot. And so a space worm, on an asteroid belt, it's hilarious. I mean, I don't know what Kevin J. Anderson says about it, but it's like, how is this huge thing getting enough to eat on this asteroid? I suppose he eats, maybe, I don't know, because Minox are inside him, and I have no clue. But doesn't matter. It's just fantastic. Indoor Ewoks. I wonder how influential this was for, like, let's say, the Caravan of Courage or the Fight for Endor. Those two movies that are like the apocryphal movies that were made, and also the Ewok show. I'm a big kind of fan of that. Those weird movies and shows. But I believe a lot of it probably stemmed from this Ewok culture and like their adversaries, and just really cool, Islander type of stuff. Like even in, it's contrast. Like he was really good about like contrasting and setting you in. Okay, it's a forest world, but forests probably have lakes and rivers and alpine mountains, and there's this dynamic thing that's happening here. It's like river, forest, mountain, and it's so convincing and explorative. Like as an audience, you can feel like you're in an actual space without a significant amount of like perspective. I mean, I think there is probably more than I know, and I'm not the best at it, but the perspective is happening here. I think that's really successful, and that's probably where he's putting his attention. But as far as like just like layers of variety behind, these are probably pretty flat. But yeah, obviously great app perspective, and just blending stuff out, like all these little wood pieces just going into the background. So starting like really specific up front. Here's the bad guys that we're gonna really see in Caravan of Courage and A Fight for Endor. These kind of like led by kind of a witch. Here's I think it's like Tyndall, is that her name? But really interesting like magic-y stuff in the Star Wars universe. It's like not really Force related. It's like got its own sort of magic-y type stuff on, and it's so funny. It's like it gets really funny in the show, the Ewoks. Bespin, Cloud City, and they do Cloud. He does Cloud City, but he also goes out and here's the Tibanna gas mines, and really interesting. It's all just a combination of like organic, tribal type elements of like just people exposed on this giant like flying fish, as well as coexisting with these remarkably complex mechanical structures. That's a it's a vision. It's like many times that won't happen. So it's like an idealistic picture where if there's an invasion of like mechanical world into the organic, there's a lot of times in which that doesn't work out at all well for the animal world, for the organic world. But it's kind of like an idealistic image, right? Like it's a little bit like Thomas Kincaid in a certain way, where he's making these things that wouldn't happen exactly, but it's a vision of how it could or how it could look if it did work, which I think is like the kind of the spiritual element to what we're seeing. It's not just that I don't know. There's something else happening, I think, that could just be in my mind. I don't know if Ralph was thinking about it, but it does suggest that to me. And I think I'm not wholly unique from everyone else, so I imagine it does to others as well. We go out from the city, we get, unorganic world. I think that's an interesting part that he's showing us that we don't often get in the movies. That wilderness that exists outside of the cities. Best man, this is always a fun image that I went back to as a kid, just to imagine that there are just kids, maybe my age, hanging out in this place was so explosive to my mind. That little stories could exist in this big world. And these are incredibly, these are probably small, but they just work so well. It's all composition. Interior cockpit stuff. It's like, this is sort of Jetsons type architecture almost. This is a domestic kind of vision. It's like a couple driving to work. There's no explosions. There's no, they're in a traffic line. It's not exciting, but it is pleasant. It is interesting. There's plenty of interest here. These were cool. These were in the X-Wing Rogue Squadron, I think, or maybe it's just the X-Wing Nintendo 64 game. But I loved that level. And here are those vertical clouds. They're just like giant, like trees or mountains, and it's just so cool. But it is contrasted with different kinds of clouds. So a real nice sensitivity to make something that's hanging in the air feel a part of, it's not alone there. It's hanging in the air, surrounded by clouds and other things that are work in the world, in this world. Yavin 4, I think is the last one. Oh, no, I think Alderaan is after that. If you stuck this far with me, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying it. Yavin 4, we've got this guy, a pilot, writing about his experience being stationed on Yavin 4. And it is set up to be this like abandoned old religious community or ancient Jedi temple, or ancient Sith temple. Actually, a lot of stuff has been written, I think, or maybe not a lot, but certain things. And I don't know. I know there's like some interesting stuff with the Force happening on Yavin 4. These trees remind me of Bob Ross. I just I think there's some similarities. It's like brush strokes, but I would say, much more sensitive than Bob Ross. Like, there's so much more atmosphere here, and there's so much more depth, I think. Gotta love Bob, but there was something about his images always feeling kind of flat. And Ralph has so much depth here, but it's a pretty static image. This curve is really successful. These lights, like, look at how successful simplicity is in these, this case of the lights zooming up from the planet. He's not drawing X-wings, he's just drawing tiny dots of light. In this scale, I think there's like some principle of like a third or something. I've heard other people talk about it, but really a lot of the detail is jammed, or I think there's something about this scale where, small amount of detail and interest and contrast back here with little lights and colors, whereas all the rest is basically brown and greens. A lot of nuance there too, tons of detail as well. So definitely can't overshadow that, but there's something about offsetting stuff that it's a set piece. And the characters and vehicles aren't the main thing, but they are probably the focal point. Super creepy. I think maybe a relic of ancient Sith worship or Jedi stuff. But similar to, how Tolkien wrote, right? Like Tolkien wrote all of this stuff because he knew his mythology, the world that he was creating for Middle Earth. And it's like, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are the film versions of the written material. They're the narrative versions that exist in a real world. And the Silmarillion is that expanded universe, essentially. And I think this as well, it helped me enjoy the movies even more because I know much more about the things that the characters are interacting with, the worlds, the places. There's so much more depth. I think just like volume of content is interesting. Volume of good content. Even bad content, though. There's something to be said just about like tons of content that people can about a specific kind of world or universe in which people can go into and learn more and more and more about. And when you're young, like I was with Star Wars, got all the time in the world, like can do homework relatively quickly and spend most of my time reading Star Wars expanded universe novels. Alderaan was pretty cool. This might be my favorite in an emotional context because it's that piece of the Star Wars universe that we lost before we had it almost. And I'm a big Princess Leia fan, and I'd love to see where she grew up as a girl. And it fits into, I don't know. It's just a lovely vision. It's almost like, I don't know if, again, it's like, why is Ralph doing this? I can't imagine that we need to see the planet, or George was like, I probably just gave him a list of planets and was like, hey, this is the MO on each one. Maybe give us something for each one. But, we're never, I don't know, it's like we never see that. So anyway, this grassy world that really is the idealistic culture, right? It's like, it's almost the most beautiful because it's the thing we lose. And the rebels, it's like, obviously those are the bad guys. If they're blowing up a planet like this, can't be good guys. There's so much beauty and openness and cohesive kind of symbiotic relationship between, again, the mechanical world of people, but even they are designing things in organic ways and shapes. They're living at one, a little bit like the elves in the forest of Lothlorien or Rivendell. It's got a lot of that same idea through aesthetics in Alderaan and Ralph's viewpoint. Mechanical canyons that are, organic. I mean, it's not efficient, right? It's not efficient, but it is beautiful. And I think that's good design, where it is taking into account the organic nature in which the world is set up. And we're trying to be part of that. We're not trying to distance ourselves from that. Of course, this looks like Coruscant, but can't be helped, I imagine. Also weird. I mean, it is like, again, I mean, maybe it is this. I mean, it is in it. It's so subtle, but it's like this. It's like this manufactured ocean, right? It's like, maybe they do need to have this for some mechanical reason, for some city reason, but perhaps, just the decision to make it like blue glass is much more beautifully aesthetic than if it were just flat concrete. Really interesting. It's almost like, he was designing for Epcot or something. Sort of, it's interesting, it's like, what if New York City looked like this? Where, you're going into a grassy kind of outbank. I mean, obviously it's impossible because, it's just impossible. But, that is the sort of the vision of the future, where it's not just humans dominating verdant land. They're incorporating it and planning on it. And it's like, I don't know how many cities are being built, how many new cities are left to be built in the world, but certainly I think that's the challenge for all cities in the world now, which is how to bring more plant life, more, because it affects the residents, Anyway, there you go. That's the Illustrated Star Wars Universe by Ralph McQuarrie and Kevin J. Anderson. If you want a really interesting look in the early expanded universe, get this book. Do read it. If you're a writer, this is a fun book to read. Get some ideas, and definitely if you're an artist, this is I don't know how easy this can be found, but is much more easy to have on your desk than those two giant Abrams books, which are amazing, and maybe we'll go over those. But there you go. Give Ralph a look, and think about composition a lot. Whenever you think about composition, go to Ralph, check out his stuff, and I think you'll find a helping hand. All right, till next week. Thanks for watching.